fight together. There's power when we organize. Power when we stand and fight together. There is power when we organize.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Donald Trump will be back in August. Rest assured, he will be reinstated. I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know what kook factory this was dreamt up in. But evidently, there are folks out there, and Donald Trump himself, pushing the idea that he's going to be reinstated in August. The My Pillow guys out there pushing it, so it's got to be true. Yeah, he's coming back. And this is one of those things that got me thinking today. That, it was just one of those kind of laughable moments where, someone brought this up to me, he's coming back in August, and you'll see what happens. You'll see. And I go, okay. I go, you know what this is starting to remind me of? For those of us who were of age in the 80s, do you remember when the end of the world was like every couple of years? And you'd have these kooks who were straightened out on the street corners with the Bible screaming, the end's coming. We have the scripts, or, Nostradamus said, or the Mayan calendar, or whatever. And they would be like, we've finally got the right decoder ring. We have finally figured it out. The end of the world is blank. And I remember back then going, if you truly believe the end of the world is tomorrow, give me all of your stuff. You clearly aren't going to need it. It's the end of the world tomorrow. Give me everything. Give me everything in your pocket. Give me everything that you've got, because you don't need it. You don't want to have to carry it with you to the end. No one ever took me up on it because they all knew it was nonsense. But we kept doing that. And then it was the final. Y2K was supposed to be, 2000 was supposed to be the absolute end times. Everything was going to shut down. The power was going to go out. The water was going to stop. Everything was going to stop because the computers that run everything possibly couldn't recognize the number 2, which meant it was over. We were all going to die, freezing, whatever. It was the end times. And these kooks have been saying this stuff for a long time, and they get themselves all lathered up and all tingly in the panties, and they're going like JoJo the Idiot Boy because they're in the know. This gives me that same kind of feel. A handful of kooks who are going out and spreading the word, screaming on the street corner, or in this case, social media, and bringing in a bunch of people who are mentally diminished from the beginning. And look, over the weekend in Dallas, they had their kook fest, the For God and Country Patriot Roundup. Yeah, I saw this, and I really did want to spend some time watching it, but I had grass to watch grow, so I had to prioritize. But over the weekend, the Kook Fest actually did make some news. You had Louis Go-Go Gohmert out there, the Republican from Texas, the only sitting member of Congress crazy enough. Not even the kook woman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, thought enough to show up. That's how far out these folks are. That only Gohmert would show up. And he said, well, it wasn't only Republicans who were there for the insurrection. There were Democrats. There were other people. And, this has been the talking point, that it wasn't conservatives. It wasn't Trump supporters. It was Antifa. And you go, wait a minute. They all look like Trump supporters. They all had the uniform. They were all wearing that goofy hat. They were all, wrapped in the flag, in violation of the flag code. Clearly didn't read that in grade school. They were in uniform. They were carrying the Trump flag, literally had the flag. But no, there wasn't that. Now, here's how I know this is BS. If Antifa really was there, if there was one Democrat there, every Republican would have voted for the commission so that they could drill that out. Wouldn't that be great for them if they could actually prove the BS that they keep throwing out? Like the election was stolen. If they could actually prove their BS, then you'd go, hey, you got a point. But all they do is they get in their little circles, and the little cute kooks all have their little incel time, and they come up and scheme with these, who can outrage the outrage and make up the biggest lie, or say the most insane thing, which for the weekend at Kook Fest was Michael Flynn, the disgraced military person. I don't really like to give him a title anymore. I don't want to give him that official title anymore, because I fear that leads to some credibility. And this guy, to me, has none at this point. But evidently, someone stood up and asked the question at Kook Fest. He said he wants to know what happened in Myanmar, why it can't happen here. As you know, in Myanmar, they had a military coup. The military took over the country and installed their leader. His response was to this question, why that can't happen here. He said, there's no reason. He said, it should happen here. No reason. That's right. And you go, did you just call for a military coup, former military guy? So after this, he's backpedaling quickly. He says, I do not and have not at any time called for any action of that sort. Any reporting of any other belief by me is a bold-faced fabrication based on twisted reporting at a lively panel at a conference of patriotic Americans who love this country just as I do. You're talking about taking over the government. You're talking about overthrowing the government in a military coup. I don't know what country you claim to love. I seem to have missed that, because that is not in the I love America line. It's just not. Sorry, not going there with you. But here's the thing, and this is the part that's interesting to me, because the next insurrection, the next attempt will be a military coup fully backed by the GOP. You're not going to have just one guy off on the end, because look what you're seeing across this country. You're seeing Republican legislatures across the country setting up the next steal. They're setting up how they can overturn elections, how they can do whatever they want to change votes. They're setting it up as we speak. So the steal is in works. And I said from the beginning, when Trump became president, one of the first things I said is he's going to be insane. He's going to be crazy. He's going to be every bit the caricature, every bit the clown that we expect him to be. At the end, it's the guy who comes after him. He's dangerous, but he's not the real dangerous one. The real dangerous one is the one that normalizes Trump's behavior and his insanity. Think Josh Hawley. I would say the guy from North Carolina, the Madison Cawthorn guy, but he's not that bright. But this is one of those things that I just, all of these undercurrents, all of these statements. Now look, the Flynns of the world have always talked like this. They've always gone to these, the CPACs and all these right-wing, gatherings of the insanity. And they've always said outrageous things to get, the people riled up and keep the money flowing. Because at the end of this is giant graft. This is a way to rip people off. This is a way to get hardworking people who are struggling to make ends meet, to make sure that they cough up $250 to go to some crummy festival. The For God and Country Roundup Patriots, whatever. It's what it's about. Now, there are some folks out there like me who are going, hey, what's going on is serious. Really serious. This could be the end of democracy as we know it. And the first time I said that, a couple of months ago, I said somebody come back, wow, you're being hyperbolic. I don't think I was, and I don't think I am. And I point to this letter signed by 100 scholars from big named places. The Harvards, the Yales, the Cornells, the Penn States, the Ohio States, the big institutions, the big universities. That wrote a letter, and a whole bunch of these folks signed it, that basically said, you've got Republicans across this country in these states controlled by legislatures are controlled by Republicans, governors that are doing everything they can do to change the core electoral procedures in response to what they called unproven and intentionally destructive allegations. The election wasn't stolen. Every court, every elections expert without the kook crowd has said, look, this was one of the most secure in the history of this country. They say, look, there are several states in our political system that no longer meet the minimum condition for a free and fair election. They say, hence, our entire democracy is now at risk. And they go through all of this and they start talking about, look, the reality is the response to what was a fabricated situation, the big lie, has given Republicans license with their voters because they truly internalized that somehow this was stolen because there's no possible way that they could lose. They're saying, look, when you go down this path, it's real serious consequence. It could be the end of our democracy. And they point out when democracy breaks down, it takes years to come back, often decades, to reverse the damage. And what it's going to do is it's going to hurt our standing and our ability to compete globally. That's it. There's no question about it. And they go through some of the things that Republican legislators are trying to do: restrict access to the ballot, putting in criminal sentences to intimidate people from being poll watchers or nonpartisan administrators. People are like, no. So they can bring their ideologues in to oversee this. They're cutting methods that people prefer, like early voting and vote by mail. They're saying all this stuff is an attack on the fundamental, basic building block of our democracy, and that is the sanctity of the ballot box. Our ability to trust the outcome of the ballot box. And what you had, and this isn't new, Trump did this back in 2015. He was setting this all in motion back then. Because you may remember, he would say, they're not going to let me win. They'll steal the election. It's all rigged. Hillary Clinton's going to win because they're criminals. And then, he won and immediately stopped. And, there were some Democrats going, well, what about the elections? Not a peep. But this is one of these moments where you've got these really smart people going, hey, we got problems. Republicans are setting it up that in the future, they're going to do what Donald Trump wanted them to do in 2020. And that is, if they don't like the outcome of an election, they're going to reverse it. And they're going to reverse it because they've given themselves the power to do so. And they say, look, at the end of the day, Democrats got to get their heads out of their behinds, dump the filibuster if they have to, and move forward on ensuring that every citizen who is qualified to vote has access to the vote, has an equal right to the vote, it's unhindered by any obstruction, and that it is the basis of this wonderful experiment of self-rule, and it has to be there. We need a new Voting Rights Act. Need to undo the damage that the Supreme Court did in the Shelby versus Harris case, and we need to undo the damage that Republican legislatures across the country are doing as we speak. They said, look, we urge members of Congress to do whatever is necessary, including suspending the filibuster in order to pass national voting and election administration standards that both guarantee the vote for all Americans equally and prevent state legislatures from manipulating the rules in order to manufacture the results they want. Our democracy is fundamentally at stake. History will judge what we do at this moment, signed by, like I said, a bunch of people from Harvard and Cornell and Penn State and Ohio State and big prestigious universities. Oddly enough, who's not there? All of the adjunct professors that I know who are brilliant people, who clearly understand this stuff as well, but they're silenced because they're all adjuncts. They're all at will. They're afraid to come out and speak because this is what the destruction of our higher education system has brought us. The really smart people, the most learned in our society, are being silenced every day because, hey, their kids need to eat too. So for me, this is just one of those moments where I go, at some point, we have to wake up. Now, initially I had someone tell me, well, that's because all those people are stupid. And some of them are. I don't doubt that. The Republicans built an incredible message machine. The Republicans were talking to working class voters where nobody else did for years, for decades. And I said, you look at today's Fox viewer and today's ultra kook, the Q-kook crowd. They didn't just happen. It's like the frog in the water. If you threw it at them right away and said, here, look at all this craziness, most people would repel it. This has been decades in the making. This has been slow brainwashing, and I watched it happen. I watched people who I thought were sane and rational go to some really far places because it's what they were being told repeatedly over and over and over again in everything that they consumed. And there's nothing on the other side, which is why I started this program 16 years ago. To say, look, there's another side to that coin. And maybe we should be talking about all aspects. And we still need to do this stuff. Now, what I find interesting is I'm hoping I keep coming back to, I hope there are good, sane, decent conservatives left. I know my hope is diminishing, but there have to be some. I look at this congressman from Michigan. Pete Meyer is his name. He says he's basically fed up with the pro-Trump stuff. He tweeted out over the Memorial Day weekend, quote, memories and knowledge that for too many is a reminder of a father, mother, wife, husband, son, daughter gone. Our shared obligation to make this nation worthy of their sacrifice. And then there are those who take this sacrifice for granted, waxing patriotic while salivating for civil war, claiming they need to destroy the republic in order to save it, in the ultimate betrayal of oaths sworn. Those treacherous snakes can go straight to hell. That's the Republican that I'm seeking. That's the patriot that I'm seeking in the Republican Party to steer them back to some bit of sanity. I talk to Joe Walsh all the time. We don't get along on policy issues, but this is where we agree. There have to be some. And I look at this op-ed written by columnist Sam Venerable over at the Knoxville News Sentinel. He asked the question, how much deadly violence against your own members would it have taken for you to think this incident, he's talking about January 6th, was serious enough to be probed? Vice President Mike Pence's lifeless body in the noose rioters had erected on Capitol grounds, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's head on a pike, rivers of blood flowing from the chambers where you hid as the building was being overrun by mob. He goes, hey, how can you loudly express support for the men and women in blue, yet conclude that the death of and injuries to Capitol Police, as well as those from other law enforcement agencies who tried to repel the assault, were not worth looking into? He goes on to say how much ice water must flow through your veins to listen to the impassioned plea for an investigation from the mother of fallen Capitol Police officer Brian Sicknick, and then vote nay when the vote was taken. That's the question, isn't it? Amazing stuff to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up and the union